Welcome back to the White Lad Podcast. I'm James Marshall, and this episode is brought to you by the great Straight Face Razors. If you live in New Zealand and you're after a new razor, then look no further than this great product. The sharpest 5-blade head will have your face looking like a fresh young lad again. And for White Lad listeners, you can get a whopping 50% off your first order by heading to waterlad.com and clicking on the Straight Face logo, and the discount will be all there ready to go. $15 for 4 heads. It's an absolute steal and a must try if you're looking for a new razor. Also, a massive thank you to anyone who has brought themselves some Lad merch or some Wad Lad coffee or some Pure Sport CBD. All of these things have helped bring this podcast to you. So if you enjoy this podcast, head over to waterlad.com and treat yourself to one of these great products. It is all very much appreciated, and it is helping make this podcast grow. Anyway, let's get into this one. Let's roll the intro.
What a lad, what a lad, what a lad, what an absolute lad. What a lad, what a lad, what a lad, what an absolute lad.
Just love that tune. Now today I have a very special guest on the podcast. After the rugby world was shocked last week with the sudden retirement of one of English Premiership's most promising young players due to concussion at just a tender age of 24 years old, I thought it was a great chance to get the lad on to reflect about his career and go into some depth about concussion. And like all my guests are, this guy is an absolute lad, one of the greats. It is Theo Brophy Clews. Welcome, Boris. Thanks for coming on, mate.
Hey, Jimmy. Thanks for having me, mate.
Mate, so it's all done. Rugby is finished. How do you feel?
Yeah, I feel old, to be honest. I feel older than I thought I would. I'm joining the retired crew.
Yeah, well.
So, thanks. It's weird. There's lots to be really positive about in terms of how much I enjoyed my career, and obviously I've got a few exciting things to look forward to. But it is a bit of a weird feeling, definitely.
Was it a sudden incident? I didn't know it was coming at all, so it sort of shocked me. But did you sort of have a feeling it was close, or how did it all happen?
So, obviously, as you'll know, but I guess people listening might not. I've had a decent history with concussion. So I've had obviously a few kind of normal ones and a couple of bad ones. I ended up taking a layoff, kind of a forced layoff for about 6 months, probably 3 years ago. But since then I'd been fine, really. So I'd had no issues with my head. So I was kind of fit and played kind of 2 seasons. And then I basically had one, probably kind of 2 months ago, and then played a good run of games after that, and then had another one. And so it was kind of it was fine. I had no issues, and then suddenly it was kind of in the picture again. And I had a pretty open conversation with Bruiser, the head of medical at Irish. And after this kind of last concussion, he basically sat down. I kind of walked into the physio room, and I was kind of I'd obviously thought about my career before and thought about concussion a lot because of my history with it. And but yeah, it was quite interesting, him sitting me down and looking me in the eyes, and him kind of starting to tear up. And I was like, what's he going to say here? And he was just like, look, I've been thinking, I was just like, he said to me that he'd been thinking about it a lot. And obviously he'd known me ever since I'd been in the club. So he'd known me since I was 17.
Yeah.
And he kind of just looks at me and is like, look, Theo, I think you're done here. I think it's time, for my kind of well-being and my health going forward. He was like, I don't think you can keep doing this. I genuinely believe this is the right thing to do. And I kind of sat there and looked at him and was like, wow, that just happened. So yeah, after that, it was, we had a few more conversations with a concussion clinic, the specialists. But I think when he told me that, obviously it had been in my head. I kind of looked at him, and because I trust him so much, and I was just like, you know what, he's right. This is the best thing. So that was it, really, mate. So it was kind of in a way, it was crazy. It was a long time coming, but also it then happened very, very quickly.
Yeah. So you going into that meeting, you had no thoughts at all about retirement?
Not really. I'd probably it's probably worth mentioning that probably a few months before, so before my kind of first concussion this season, I'd had a chat with because there's a lot of stuff coming out in England. I don't know kind of how far it's spanning in terms of, obviously it's rugby, but there's a few kind of ex-rugby players. Have you heard about this?
The lawsuit.
Yeah. So there's a couple of England and Welsh rugby players suing the RFU for kind of mismanagement of concussions, because sadly they've got early onset dementia due to rugby injuries, which is awful. But that had come out before this had happened. So I'd had a few conversations because obviously having had a couple myself, I was a bit worried, but I was kind of not kind of like talked down, but there's lots of factors, mitigating factors, and it's so complicated. But so I'd had a conversation with a coach who'd retired because of concussion, and he basically said to me that he was 27 when he retired, and he said to me that like I'd be absolutely fine if I was retired, as in like if I retired straight away. He was like, I didn't want to push myself till the absolute limit, but he was like, you'll be absolutely fine, mate. He's like, just do it. And I was like, I haven't asked about if I should retire or not, and I've got a coach telling me that I'm going to be fine. I was like, what's going on here? So like I'd had it framed in my mind, and then I guess potentially after the concussion, so it was a Friday night game against Bath. Literally the first impact of the game kind of rocked me, and I felt pretty awful. And it was like 2 minutes or so, like ball and play, and I got taken off after that. And it probably had like two and a bit days before I spoke to Bruiser. But then, yeah, like I hadn't really thought about it. I wasn't like, this is it. This is like the last one. I was like, oh, I'll go speak to him and see what he has to say. Yeah. And then, yeah, after that, moved pretty quickly.
So that final one wasn't even a massive impact. It was just a regular tackle, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the thing that kind of worried Brian, is that like it was literally off the kickoff. I was chasing, and there was like a lifting pod, like that's gone up, and I've gone to kind of hit it, and I think kind of like my chin, like neck area had been hit by someone like knee or something as they were coming down.
Yeah,
but it wasn't like I got a shoulder to the head in like a brutal tackle.
Yeah,
and then after that, basically like Brian, like I said, he's known me for a while, so he kind of knows when I've had something, and he was watching me straight after that. And then I had a couple, and then I actually got a decent shot on my head and like a hip in a tackle. So it wasn't like a super clear cut one. And I think he, from his experience, and then obviously he had time to think about it. There's obviously a few kind of reasons behind the kind of retirement. It's not like, don't know, jumping ship, and it, like, to be honest, it's not massively like my decision. Like I don't really want to retire, but like I said, when someone has that conversation, you are like, I got to take it seriously.
So what sort of symptoms do you have from this one? Were they any different to any of the other ones? Any worse?
No, I think something that I probably struggled with this one a little bit more was like balance. Like that one, even though it wasn't particularly bad, for a couple of days after, I felt really bad. Yeah. Just kind of the general stuff like balance, dizziness, headaches. And they probably lasted kind of probably like just over a week. But I was kind of on my way to making this decision by then. I've not been someone who's like struggled really long term with symptoms, but I think Brian said it well, that like you don't want to get to the point there when you can't do anything until you make the call to stop hitting your head. And I think the nature of my career is that like I've had quite a few, and he believes, and he said it out really well, that I was like, it's not really going to change, and you don't want to kind of keep going down that road until you're like, oh my God, we could have made this decision a few years ago.
Yeah, fair enough. Was there ever thought of you just taking a long break out of the game, maybe like 1 or 2 years, and then reassess it then? Or you just know, like once you're done, you feel like you're done, there's no point trying to get back in there? It's
a really good point. And because I've had a quite long layoff that kind of actually kind of worked in a way, like I was kind of fine after that. I didn't struggle with it so much. It kind of crossed my mind, and then I was like, you know what, there is things I want to do outside of rugby. There is a life I want to pursue. And I think I was at this point when I'd had this conversation. I took a week off and went to see my mum in Wales and just kind of chilled out for a bit. And it got to the point where I was like, I don't want to look back at this and be like, I should have done something different. Especially, like I said, with the medical advice I got, I was like, and a lot of people had said to me, like, there was a lot of really good people around me being like, there's like, while rugby's brilliant, there's a lot more to life. And like, you obviously know that you got 3 boys now. And I think obviously it gets quite like serious when you're thinking about it so long term. And so I was just like, you know what, I think that's me. And I think that I don't want to kind of get back in and then have one really bad one and be like, honestly, like, what was I thinking? Yeah. Like, I kind of had those like conversations. So I think, while I would love to, and while I'm kind of going to realize how much I miss being a rugby player at some point in the next kind of few months, I just like, it would just kill me if I look back at it and was like, I made the wrong decision.
Yeah. So you're still with the boys at the moment. You're still in around the environment, still as a professional rugby player until the end of the season. Is that right?
Yes, that is right. I'm like the captain of the non-23.
Oh, true.
I'm kind of currently, yeah, so I'm kind of doing bits and bobs in training. I'm kind of gymming with the boys, being in meetings, helping out, and obviously running around in my pink bib, which is the non-contact bib. So no one's laying a finger on me, thankfully. Which I've actually realised, like rugby's class when you don't have to tackle or like do any contact in training. So yeah, but that's been really nice. I think that's kind of eased this kind of transition. Like I've been around all the boys, like been around my good mates, and like it was actually like it was so nice, mate, to like tell them like face to face. Like while obviously the announcement kind of came out, I'd spoken to the guys at the club a couple of weeks previous, and it was pretty brutal standing up in, like after a team meeting and being like, look, this is what's happening. But like it was really nice in the way that I got to like tell everyone like to their face like exactly kind of what was happening and why it was going on. But yeah, mate, and this period's been like, it's been a bit of a holiday, I guess, like being around everyone, still training, still seeing the boys outside of rugby, playing golf with them. Like,
dream.
Yeah, I know. And my body doesn't feel shit all the time. So that's good too.
How have you managed to avoid Snake in those 15 on 15 runarounds? He used to be a nightmare in those games, always after the injured bibs.
I know. That's why he's called the Snake. I mean, he'll say that it's not why he's called the Snake, but it is really. I just see his shiny dome flying at me from miles away now, so I can get out of the way. Yeah, it is quite. There is kind of a funny where I'm like, I'll like, if obviously kind of it's like a square shoulder or whatever, and boys are kind of running towards me, and I'll like shout touch, and then obviously like the big boys, like they've got no idea. So I've got to the point where like I'm like diving out of the way of tackles. It's kind of like, it's a bit of a joke, but I've got to make the most of it while I still can.
Oh, that's classic. So how many concussions did you actually have all up, and like what sort of number are we talking here? Was it a massive number?
So when you ask someone who's had a few concussions how many concussions they had, and they say I don't know, it's always yeah. I think in my professional like career, I probably had 6 or 7 kind of proper incidences. And like I've been lucky in the fact that I've got like a really good medical team around me. There's loads of regulations. There's a specialist concussion clinic that's like outside of the club that we have to go see after concussions to get a kind of unbiased view. So I'd say all mine have been managed pretty well. And also they'll say that it's not like the amount of concussions, it's like the kind of, it's the prolonged exposure to like head impacts. So if you have like, if like you had a 20-year career, you're obviously exposed to quite a lot of head impacts versus if you had a 6-year career like mine and had a couple of serious ones. I mean, yeah, you'll speak to these guys and they'll tell you they don't know, but I think it's kind of, you obviously hear some like horrible numbers about people like over 10. I'm almost lucky in this situation that it's kind of taken out of my hands in a way.
Yeah, and what are your thoughts on that lawsuit? You've obviously got no regrets about playing rugby at all because you've sort of walked away from the game fine, but how do you feel about these guys who are looking to press charges against World Rugby for the way their head knocks were treated?
Yeah, it's difficult. Like, I obviously they played in kind of like a different era to us, so they're like coming up through the kind of like just as it's turning professional. Like you hear like horror stories about the stuff they go through in training, and like boys getting knocked out in training and then playing the next day, and like all stuff like this. And also as well, like something that like I'm quite clear about. Like obviously, quite a few people have messaged me after the announcement and stuff. I don't have anything against rugby, and I'm glad that I don't, and I'm not bitter about anything about stuff was managed or whatever. Because like it's kind of just, this is what's happened to me. It's not rugby in general. Whereas I think these guys have had such like severe kind of life-changing alterations that I think they would view it in a very different way, especially with some of the things they probably had to go through. With anything, I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I think they do want to change the sport as well. Like I think they do want to make sure that that the league and the unions are doing everything they can, which I think is good. And there's obviously a lot of chat around contact and training and HIAs and stuff. So I think like things like this will hopefully change the game for the better. Not that I think there is some inherent real issue with rugby because it's a contact sport. And and injuries happen, like, you know.
And what are your thoughts about the rules at the moment? Obviously, I think it's a little bit worse over in the English Premiership and over in the UK around the head knocks and red cards. And I've seen some pretty rough calls on some guys with accidental head contact. So how do you feel the game is over there? Do you think they're on the money with going overboard with the decisions, or do you think it might be a little bit of an overreaction?
Yeah, I mean, I'd hate to be a ref or on the refereeing board at the moment,
So
because,
hard,
like you said, there is. Yeah, and like they're obviously like they are trying and they have to look after players, but it's really difficult, some of the calls that are being made, because like we've had a couple this year where in tackles players are kind of they've ducked, and you know, like, I mean, you watch forwards, like they've just hit heads.
Yeah.
Like it happens, like, and they're getting red cards in tackles where there's no malice, there's no intent, like people just hit heads.
Yeah.
Like it's like I was chatting with a couple of boys watching the game last night about the fact that teams like are gonna just start waiting till there's 14 men on the pitch to start like playing, because I don't know what the stats are, but every game someone's getting yellow carded or red carded for high tackle or impact to the head. Yeah, I'm lucky that I've only ever like chopped people low because I'm not big enough to whack people high. So if I was a big boy who liked hitting people, it would be tough. I think it's good that they're trying to go overboard in terms of they're trying to change the way that players are tackling.
Yeah.
But the problem is, I don't think they'll achieve that by like penalising people. I think you need to like coach people how to tackle differently.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think you were still at the club when they are second round in the champ. No, when we had they had this thing called the Championship Cup. And they thought they were going to change the rules. So you couldn't tackle like anything above like the nipples was like a high tackle.
I did hear about that, yeah.
And it genuinely, so everyone was like chop tackling. First game, 6 concussions.
Was it?
Like genuinely. So because they just changed the rules, like players like all of a sudden like were doing stuff they'd never done before. Like diving at people's ankles, people just getting like head on hips, like there was knees, like it was just like it was a bit of a sick joke, like really watching this happen, like the first game. So I don't think you'll end up changing it too much from like setting. Obviously, you do have to set some rules and kind of penalise players who do it badly. But I think trying to coach players to do it safer, and I don't know how you'd enforce that, but basically, especially from a young age, coaching people to tackle and carry in a way that doesn't lead to as many head impacts is probably the way to go.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So did you get more head knocks from actually tackling or carrying the ball? Because I always felt like whenever I got a head high, it didn't really affect the head. My main head knocks and incidents were all from trying to tackle low and getting a hip or getting an elbow or a knee or something like that. But any sort of head high I got, I always felt like I could just sort of bounce up and it wasn't too bad. But I don't know, what was your experience like?
Exactly the same. I used to be like, 'cause obviously, like I wasn't a big guy. Like the only way I could tackle people was like just like tackling low, chop tackling, getting low. Even like, mate, you'll have it when they're like the dreaded like their massive number 8 picks and just charges at you. Like the only thing you can do is dive at their feet, like, or you'll get on their highlight reel. So
that's what I chose.
Yeah, I'll take the highlight reel every day. Yeah, it was. I had exactly the same. So I was always tackling low, and I'd say like pretty much all of my concussions would be from tackling low around people's knees, hips, everything like that. I like tackling, but I was pretty rubbish at it. So I would just like throw myself at people, and like I genuinely watched some of my tackles, and like Dec Danaher will like hang his head, like his hands in his palms, watching me try to tackle people, just throwing myself at them. But like, yeah, I would like, I'll get hit around the head and like, you're kind of fine. But then you get like a tackle and your head glances the hip and you get a concussion. It's, I've actually probably in the last 2 years, just like our defense coach changing, and he wanted us to hold the ball up, basically get time in the tackle and tackle people higher, get our chests in front. And like, that's just the way he coached it. And this coincided with me coming back from having a bit of time off. But I felt like straight away I wasn't getting concussions, or I wasn't feeling like my face was getting messed up, like playing rugby. So it's a weird one. I would say that like for me, in my experience, like tackling higher was better for my head. Obviously I was a bit stronger probably. So yeah, I had the same experience as you, really.
It's interesting, and it's one for, I guess, World Rugby and stuff to really look into, because I feel like trying to lower the tackle height kind of makes it more dangerous. Like, you obviously experienced in that rule trial, 6 concussions in the first game. That's loose.
Mate, they scrapped it. Yeah, they scrapped it after the first 4 rounds. They were like, we can't keep doing this, which is, I mean, obviously, like, we're laughing at it. It's pretty serious, but it was like, what's going on? Because you did just get players who've never before, like, diving at people, and obviously they're going to get kneed in the head if they don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
So you're right. I think I don't know if you can lead it from rugby, but I mean, like, with anything, like, it takes a long time for these things to change. And so, like, trying to teach people to tackle them in a different way. I mean, mate, the whole like conversation around concussion, like, I'll speak to the neurologist, and he's like, I don't know how to make it better, which is kind of scary, really. It's a bit like you're sitting there listening to this guy, and he's like the expert, and he's like, yeah, we just don't know, really. Like, and he's being completely honest, because he's not going to lie to you and say that they know exactly what it causes and how to reduce it. But it is an ongoing kind of learning thing for rugby as a sport. But, like, mate, you say about tackle height, you watch something like the NRL stuff at the moment, it's pretty savage with some of those that are going on.
Mate, they're struggling to keep their tackles low at the moment. They're getting at least 2 or 3 in the bin every game. They're struggling to adapt.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, mate, it's all been awesome to hear how the sort of journey finished, but let's go back to the start for you. Like, obviously a very promising young player. How did your rugby career sort of start?
Yeah, I had a pretty kind of straight line for the first couple of years. I kind of, like, at school, I had a really good school team and a really good school coach. So I actually started Irish, mate, when I was 12, which seems like a long time ago. Yeah. Right. So I played my, like, junior rugby at Newbury, and then kind of got involved in Berkshire kind of county setup, and then through that kind of got into the Irish setup. And so, I was training at the training ground since I was 12, or kind of like Wednesday nights.
Is 12 normal, or?
I don't know. I don't think so. I was turning 13, but I was still 12 at the time.
Yeah. Like,
it does sound very early. It was my first year of county. So, like, I literally was training with, like, 16-year-olds. Right. Which I'd say, to be fair, like, as a younger player, like, I think that's why I kind of developed as a player, because I was always playing with boys that were older than me. Like, I don't know how the kind of different systems work in different countries, but like, literally as kind of young as I remember, I was always playing with older players.
Yeah.
So I was Irish, kind of in their, like, Silver Academy, I think they call it, and pretty much just obviously kind of went through that while I was playing at school. I then had kind of some good experience with the England age grade system, so kind of got into that through the Irish Academy, and some of, like, coaches like there were, like, incredible. John Fletcher is, like, a coach that I still speak to, and he ran the England age grades for years and years, and, like, some of the best players, kind of England golden age of, like, Farrell, Itoje, the Vunipolas and stuff, like, were still coached by him, and so to get into that pathway was pretty cool. And then pretty much from when I left school, I got signed full time from Irish, and then kind of got into it from there. I think then it kind of, while that was pretty linear, it then kind of hit the rocks a little bit. It went very up and down for a few years, but it was a pretty ideal start to my rugby career. Yeah,
man, how good's that? And what age were you when you made your Irish debut?
I was 17, so still at school. Yeah, it was. I got a train straight from school, and I didn't know Macca at the time, but you'll know Macca. He kind of greeted me off the train and got me in a cab to. We were playing against Scarlets, so that was it was pretty surreal. I played 3 games while I was still in my last year at school. A couple of LV Cup games, which obviously like a younger competition typically.
Yeah.
But yeah, that first game was pretty unreal. I was on the bench obviously, and it snowed the whole game. So like I'm 17, like coming on, I cannot feel my hands, like properly shitting it. So it was it was class, but it was pretty surreal experience.
And was that you at 10 then too?
Yeah. So I literally got 5 minutes. I scored with my second touch. I literally got past the ball over the line.
What a gun!
And I was just like, yeah, I know. I was just like, this is incredible. But yeah, it was like different level. Obviously, like I was a kid. I genuinely, still to this day, don't think I knew many of the calls. I was just kind of like shouting as loud as I could to try and seem like I knew what was going on. As a lot of young tens can probably imagine, the young boys when they come through are just like shouting because they're like trying to seem like they know what's going on.
Yeah, well, it's always an intimidating place to, like, especially at that age, to try and drive a team around. Like 17 years old must have been pretty intimidating. But you're a confident sort of bloke, and were you always like that, even at that age?
I probably like. Well, I wasn't naturally like a super confident guy, but I had that thing where when I played rugby, like I just kind of came out of my shell a little bit.
Yeah.
I probably went like I said, I was going to say overboard, but like, you're trying to overcompensate when you feel like you're not that comfortable in a situation, and trying to like seem like you're more confident. I think I probably had that when I was kind of coming through. I was also like, I mean, you probably kind of saw a little bit of this, that I was so like rugby was my life. When I was like, I mean, growing up, but obviously like 18, 19, it was like I was just obsessed with rugby, like proper rugby nose, like just loved it. So I mean, I think that like helped me get into it, but I think it kind of also probably didn't help me in a few ways as well.
What ways do you think it didn't help you?
I don't think I was a particularly like approachable guy when I was kind of like 18, 19. Like, I don't know, obviously I had a few kind of injuries at the time, so my first season I played a decent bit of rugby, and then in kind of the next 2 years, obviously like injury kind of like I like struck, I guess. I had a few kind of bigger ones, but I think I struggled to kind of really build like really good relationships with people in the team, because I was kind of just like rugby, and then I'd go home and do my own thing. And especially like even like the boys around me at my age, I was probably like a little kind of unwelcoming and pretty just like serious and straightforward rugby. And like and like you're like the king of this, is like some of the best rugby players, just super good guys, like really friendly, like good at building relationships and just have a good time while they're doing it. And I probably kind of missed out on that kind of enjoyment and kind of like social aspect when I was a little bit younger, because I was very straight down the line and focused about what I was trying to do.
Oh, that's interesting to hear. So do you think that was because of your personality type, or because you were just so obsessed with becoming the best rugby player you could be?
It was probably like a bit of my personality. Like I was naturally quite like analytical and kind of like the detail side of it, and like being specific with stuff. But then I think obviously the kind of like the pressure of like trying to kind of get into a Premiership side, and also like Premiership rugby, as I found out, like I came from a like age grade system where it was very like decision making and very loose and very unstructured, and I really liked that, and I've kind of thrived off that. And then I suddenly got put in an environment when I had to tell 14 guys around me where they should be for the next like 4 phases in a row.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of just like brought out the kind of analytical planning side of me that then probably didn't help me like develop as a player, because I was just focused on telling people around me what to do and where they were going to be, rather than just like playing rugby and playing the game. So I think it kind of brought it out in me. But then obviously, like you said, you get older, have some more experiences, and things change a little.
Yeah. But you obviously made the England under-20s 2 years in a row, didn't you? So how was that experience?
Yeah, it was great, and also like really, really shit at the same time. It was like my first year, I played a decent bit of Premiership rugby and didn't play that Six Nations, and then kind of rocked up to it was the Manchester World Cup for the under-20s.
Yeah.
And we ended up going to win that, but I got injured in the first game. I tore a ligament in my foot quite badly in the first game, and so didn't like feel like I was a part of that team, even though I kind of was. And then watching him go on to win it was brilliant. I didn't really have any bitterness, but I was involved in the team that won it.
Yeah.
And so the next year rolled around, and I was like, I was back fit, and I was like, yeah, this is going to be great. This is kind of my time to kind of have a good crack. And then the Six Nations that year was I was gearing up for it, and then had a bit of another niggly injury. So I ended up playing the last 2 games, but I probably played about 15 minutes of rugby in that Six Nations. But we won a Grand Slam in Ireland on St. Patrick's Day, which was like up there in terms of like class memories. My dad had been there all day, as in Ireland, in Dublin, and he like could not speak by the time he got to the end of the game. And so like I come up to it, and I'm like, come on, like where my medal after the presentation? And he just gives this like weird semblance of just like shouting at me. And I'm like, he's got no idea where he is. I still don't think he remembers that day. which is quite funny. So that was one of the good
Oh,
ones.
that's good. Those injuries, were they head knocks or were they something else?
Something else, yeah. So like thankfully, like I haven't had like loads and loads and loads. So that I've
Yeah.
also had loads of other injuries as well, which has
Yeah.
given my head a bit of a rest. Which is funny. So yeah, they were both feet, and then yeah, so that then it got to the second World Cup I played in, which was brilliant, and it was kind of more my like age group, and we got to the final that year, and then got absolutely battered by the All Blacks. That crew were.
Yeah.
I genuinely think so. I got injured in the semi final again. Sadly, the same injury I'd done the year before on my other foot. So
Yeah.
that's what I mean in terms of the like. It was brilliant, like the experiences I had, and like the boys that we kind of came through and played with was brilliant and really special. But yeah, I had some pretty kind of testing times. That was kind of my main like struggles with their injury were around that time. But yeah, there's some class memories, and like I said, being on tour when you're like 18, 19, like for a long period of time, it's kind of like it's just like a real experience. Like it's unbelievable fun.
Yeah. And how did you deal with your injuries? Like you had so many throughout your career. Like how did you come up with a process to deal with them, or especially at a young age in big sort of World Cups like that? Must have been hard to sort of deal with mentally.
Yeah, like the first one like really hit me. Like I mentioned, like my kind of getting into rugby was pretty straightforward in terms of like it was like academy system, age grade system, like first team at Irish, and then that first injury hit, and it kind of like I mentioned about those like things about me just being a rugby player and like having not much else in my life, or just being kind of too focused on that, kind of became pretty apparent in terms of I really struggled to kind of deal with life, and I was just like this sucks, and I was kind of annoyed and angry lots.
Yeah.
But then you'll know, mate, that like sometimes like the really like rubbish times of injury they teach you a lot, and you end up becoming a better player and a better person because of it. So I think I got to experience that firsthand. Like the second time I did that same foot injury, like it sucked for like immediately, but then I learned to kind of get on with stuff very quickly, and I learned to focus on what I could actually do rather than just being like, life's unfair, this sucks.
Yeah.
And I think each time I got injured, I kind of learned to do that more. And also it gave me more time outside of rugby to develop different things I was interested in, to study, to do other things. And I think that like even when I look back in my career and the injuries I had, I still think they really helped me as a person, which I think a lot of people would speak to and say. And I think that's kind of one of the good things and the bad things about being injured.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because every rugby player gets injured at some point throughout their career, and how they sort of deal with that and bounce back is a massive turning point in a lot of guys' careers. Some guys don't seem to bounce back quite like they did from their first injury, and I guess that's just the mindset they take into that rehab and as to how they sort of come back and present themselves as a player when they're ready to go. So it's a really good point that you make there.
Yeah, and like you look at some players that like are still playing. Like I obviously know he's struggled with injuries. I don't know him particularly well, but like you look at like James O'Connor as someone who had, I mean, loads of stuff like playing for the Wallabies like really young, and then had injuries and issues with like selection and fitness and like off-field stuff, I guess. Like, I don't know his whole story, and now he's being considered being like potentially being the captain for the Wallabies. Like people like him, and there'll be loads of boys that have done this at like a high level that have shown that real like flexibility. And like I genuinely think that's one of the most impressive things about people who have long careers, but careers that they do so well, but also have some like really big injuries. Like you've obviously had your fair share as well, and like you'll know how difficult it is to come back. But I think once you experience getting back once, you can kind of do it again.
Yeah, for sure. There's some guys who just get a tough break when it comes to injuries, eh?
Yeah.
So you played 63 caps for London Irish. Obviously, quite a decent amount of games in the end. Any games that sort of stand out for you?
This season, a bit of a run we've had, and like it's kind of the first time, well, not the first time, but kind of one of the main time I felt like a real part of the team. We kind of had a few like ridiculous games. Like we were losing like 32-3 against Bristol, who were the league leaders, still are, like playing an unbelievable brand of rugby, and coming back and drawing that game was pretty cool. We had a quarterfinal, like a round of 16 European game against Cardiff this year. We had a red card with about 30 minutes to play. Ended up winning in the last minute. We scored 3 tries in the last 5 minutes, coming back and win that game.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. I've had, like, I think my first St. Patrick's Day game, like, you obviously been at the club, you'll know that, like, St. Paddy's Day is quite a big thing for Irish. And so playing against Gloucester a while back, a few years ago, you were playing and scoring a try in that, I think that was quite a big moment for me, because, like, I'd been at the club for ages, but I'd never played a St. Patrick's Day game. And that was pretty sick. And I remember, like, as much as that try was cool, like, I remember I got, like, a pint of Guinness chucked on my head at the end of the game. And so, like, that was, like, my overriding memory from that game. And I was like, yeah, this is what it's supposed to be like.
Well, yeah, you talked about the season having a big impact on the side this season. You're traditionally a 10, but you got moved to 12 this season. How did that sort of come about?
Yeah, I basically became the like proper utility back this year. We had like, I think we had like, because of injuries and like I ended up coming off the bench and playing lots of different positions. I'd actually played 12 a little bit kind of through my under-20s, and kind of like on and off I'd played a bit of 12, and I was obviously that 12 that was going to move the ball like as a fly half, like going to move the ball around, could kick, could do all those things. And I think because of like the squad that we had at the time, Paddy at 10 at Irish is like this, he's kind of just like, he runs the team, like the team is kind of his, he controls everything, and has been a brilliant player for us this year. And so, like, it never, like, I probably wasn't going to play much at 10. And so, because of an injury and some, like, selection stuff, I ended up starting the game at 12. And that was that Bristol game, actually, where we were losing by 30 points after half time. And I think, like, just for me at that time, like, I'd got to a point in my career where I was like, I'm not going to hold back, and I'm going to try stuff and take risks, which I probably hadn't done before. And I think because of that, it lent itself to a few things coming off, and I actually just really enjoyed playing 12, having a bit more space, kind of being that second set of eyes, second set of hands. I think briefly, I think we played 10 and 12 against Quins a few years ago, and like I just think like you get to play inside, like playing outside you was like a good experience, because you kind of get to like also like learn off that person, but kind of help them and help them manage the team as someone who's played fly half as well. And so I think it kind of suited me this year in the team that we had.
I've always found 10s love having another 10 playing 12 outside them, because second ball player, they know what to look for, they know the comms to feed in, and it just makes their job so much easier, eh?
Yeah, it literally is. I think though, to be fair, you can overdo it. We've had a couple of times this season where we've had like, we spoke about Jacob, and like we've had like 3 or 4 10s on the pitch at the same time playing different positions. And I'm like, that's a bit much, because at some point someone needs to make a tackle. But no, it is like you said, it's good, and it kind of takes the pressure off that guy who's actually playing 10, and then as a 10 playing 12, you can actually just have a bit more freedom. You don't have to run the team as much. You don't have to make as many decisions. Like I mentioned, like I ended up just playing rugby and playing a game, as opposed to like thinking about stuff and controlling other people.
Mate, sounds like you were just ready to take off and then crack on to the international scene, but injuries cut it short. But obviously it's awesome to hear that you're comfortable with that, and mate, you're in a good space, obviously not being affected by it too much, your body anyway. But life after rugby, you're into that now, or you're into that soon once the season's finished. What are your plans? I know you've set up an awesome nutrition plan called the Rugby Grub. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so that's one of those things that kind of outside of rugby, I had that time to kind of try and do something. And so me and Harry Elrington, who's Irish as well, we basically got like forced to, because the boys at the club basically we had an old S&C coach who basically just didn't trust anyone to cook any meals for themselves. So he asked me and Harry to like set up a recipe sharing platform for the club, so people would cook properly outside of the club. And so from that, it kind of like snowballed, I guess, like kind of accidentally into us setting up this page of Rugby Grub. And it basically became like our life and kind of our job for a couple of years outside of rugby. We basically were putting recipes. We both actually did a nutrition qualification outside it as well. So yeah, Rugby Grub, it became this, we were doing some coaching as well. And it was really good fun, to be fair. And like I mentioned to you earlier, we're looking for someone at the moment to kind of help us come on board and do some more content for us while both our lives are changing a little bit. So it's been a brilliant journey, and it's been something that's probably kept me going outside of rugby for for a decent bit.
Was cooking something you're always passionate about, or did you sort of stumble across it?
I kind of stumbled upon it, really. I think like it made us kind of be creative, in like we both love food and we both love cooking, and it's kind of just spiraled something that we were doing all the time, and we love kind of coming up with new recipes, trying new things, figuring out how it fit in our diet. And I think because we were kind of forced to like do it and put content out there, it kind of brought the best out of us in cooking and in kind of learning nutrition stuff.
Is that what you're looking to do now that you're finished? You're looking to sort of put all your energy into that?
Funnily enough, it's not actually. I had this, like, obviously it was such a good thing for us, and like we loved doing it, and like I said, we were kind of qualified nutrition coaches. But I think like through that process, I realized like the thing that I liked most about it was kind of like talking to people about like their stuff and how they thought about things and how they like approached. Obviously, like nutrition was the kind of thing we were talking about, but people would speak to us about what they were stressed about, issues in their like difficulties they're going through in their life, and why they're eating a certain way, or why they wanted to gain weight or lose weight. And I found myself like far more interested in that than actually kind of helping them along the kind of actual nutrition. And alongside kind of working in rugby and having access to psychologists, I'm actually going to go study psychology after this. So I'm kind of going back to being a student again. So it's something that I thought about, and I was like, you know what, this is actually kind of what I wanted to do like long term. And like you said, it's kind of come at a good time that I'm going to have to go back to uni and kind of give it another crack. So yeah, that's the plan at the moment, really.
How many years have you got to do at uni?
Yeah, so it's a master. So it's basically a 1 year masters. I've already got an undergrad I did alongside the rugby. So yeah, so it's basically I'm going to do it 2 years part time.
Yeah, and
then like I said, I'm in one of the retired players, so I'm going to find some work outside of that. But yeah, psychology is the thing I want to go into kind of long term.
Cool. And what's the dream? What's the dream job for you?
I'll be honest, I don't really know. Yeah. I think I'd love to work in sport again. Like I see the work the sports psychologists do, and I think that's sick. And I think while I kind of want to distance a little bit from rugby, like being part of a team and being involved in boys, I mean, like, you know, as rugby players, everyone's living their dream, and just being in that environment is so cool and so interesting. So I think that's what I'll go to long term. Like I've got like a real interest in there's like a company I'm going to get involved with, hopefully, that kind of do leadership and like resilience and like kind of mental skills coaching for children and kind of young people.
Yeah.
And that's like, I find that like really interesting, because obviously if you can do that at that age, then it helps people, like I said, when they get older and like shit hits the fan, like stuff like this, I guess. Like if I'd had that when I was kind of like 13, 14, who knows how I'd be able to deal with stuff. But I think that's pretty cool. So I'm kind of going to go down that road. And I mean, like you might know at the moment, I think once you come out of rugby, it's always been the kind of like linear, this is where I want to go. And at the moment, I'm kind of in that period of like, got to figure stuff out and kind of just enjoy the ride and see what happens, really, which I've kind of never had to do. But hopefully it works out like that.
Mate, that's exciting stuff, and you'll be an absolute wizard at whatever you choose. But mate, what a career, what a half career, or what a start of a new career, I guess. Mate, what a journey it's been. But anyway, we've gone to our Instagram, as always, for some questions, and you have come up with plenty, mainly from one person, but there is a few others in here as well. First question, are you worried that you'll have some ongoing concussion issues?
Yeah, I am a bit worried. Like we mentioned about the guys going through at the moment, like I'm a bit worried about that, but I think my rugby career could have come to an end anyway. Like I could have ruined my knee. Like obviously, like our good mate Mike, he had a pretty awful hamstring injury that sadly finished his career. Like that could affect you in lots and lots of different ways. Like my dad could never throw because the shoulder was so fucked from rugby. So like sure. I am obviously worried, but I understand. But like I think we're looked after in a way that hopefully I shouldn't have too kind of negative effects down the future. So I am a little bit worried, but like I understand that's part and parcel of what we did.
Fair enough. Okay, next question. Is 3 weeks off footy after a head knock long enough, even if you have no symptoms?
I'm probably not the person to ask, but to be perfectly honest, But I'll give my opinion anyway. I got told a while ago by one of the specialists that he said that he worried for how quickly people got back after having no symptoms. Um, so I just think you've got to be like, you've got to have a real responsibility for yourself, because you might have had no real symptoms for 3 weeks, let's say, but everyone kind of knows the feeling when you don't feel quite right when you're playing back, or like I remember getting back and I felt fine, but I could not take a high ball to save my life. I just couldn't see the ball. And so I was like, either I just suck at this or there's something still not on. So, which I do suck at high balls. So I think that's a bad example. But yeah, I think you gotta really know like yourself. So I think it's on you, on like the player. I know it's difficult when you're pressured to get back into a sport, and when it's like, this is the time it takes, you should be fine by now. But when it comes to your head, like, I think you do have to take a massive personal responsibility to be like, am I okay? Am I right? And if you're not comfortable for whatever reason, just take more time. I think that's what I'd say.
That's good advice, because it's the worst thing about concussion. Everyone always asks, oh, when are you going to be back? And how you feeling? Have you got a headache and all this sort of stuff? It's constant questions about it. And you start overthinking it and you think, am I sweet? I don't quite feel right, that sort of feeling that you feel like, oh, I could play if I needed to, sort of thing. And that's where you start getting so far in your head that you start overthinking it, eh?
Yeah, it's so difficult. And like, I mean, we've both been there before. Like, I even had it when I'd come back, I'd made my decision, and I was like making up stories, because obviously I came back in and like the 2 days before I told everyone at Irish, like everyone's kind of like, oh, how's it going? How you feeling? When are you going to be back? Exactly that.
Yeah.
And I obviously knew that I was going to retire. So I had to like just make up stuff. It was actually kind of fun in a weird way. I was telling one person that I was going to like take 2 weeks. One person, I'd be back this week. I don't know. But yeah, it is difficult when you get that bombardment. There is pressure to be back.
Yeah.
And like I said, with the concussion, sometimes like you don't know if you're fine. You're a bit like, I've got no idea. I feel a bit weird, but it's been 2 weeks. I should be fine. It's a difficult one.
Sure is. Okay. Well, this is one interesting one for some. What are the questions asked when you get sent off for an HIA? You'll know these back to front.
Yeah, should I just run you through one now, Jimmy? We'll do a bit of a role play. It's so one of them. There's a few. They read you a list of like 10 words out that by now every player has memorized.
Yeah.
So they read you these 10 words out, and you just like list them off like however shit you feel. So you do that. They ask you, there's a few like numbers. They ask you to repeat numbers in reverse order. They always ask you to say the months of the year in reverse order.
Yeah.
But like, I've got no reason to say the months of the year in normal order now. So I genuinely think I'm far better the other way around from my years of HIAs. So they do that. There's a few balance tests. So you stand on 1 foot, you stand on 2 feet, eyes closed. So there's a few bits and bobs like that. And then you basically got 10 minutes to pass it. And if you're no good for any of those things, they pull you off, which I think's pretty good. So yeah, as most rugby players know by now, it's you can kind of memorize it. You can kind of get your way through it. So
Bubble carpet. Is it those?
Yeah, bubble carpet, apple saddle. I'll keep going.
Oh, that's good stuff. Okay, what did you put in your will?
In my will? Oh my god! Right, I get what this is now. I had a bit of a shocker at a social. Oh mate, I was like, what was that? No, I get what he's on about now. I basically had is like, I mean, the best part of like a lot of being in a rugby club is like the socials where everyone's getting a good piss up together.
Yeah.
And I still maintain to this day. So it was one where we had to dress where you're from, and where a few of us are from is this like county in England called Berkshire, which is kind of famous for its kind of like shooting, like clay pigeon shooting, kind of like quite like posh and kind of wear lots of tweed. And so a few of us rocked up wearing tweed, and we took like pipes, and we'd had this social. Obviously, everyone was getting blitzed and stuff, and we were smoking these pipes. And I've got asthma, and I've never smoked a pipe in my life before. So when it comes time and we're going home, I start having like an asthma attack, and Everyone obviously thought I was just steaming, so having a bit of a shocker. And so we get home to one of the lads' houses, and I'm like lying on the sofa, like, lads, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I swear to God. And I felt so bad, and so I'm literally like lying, like I've basically taken all my clothes off at this point, so I'm kind of lying, kind of wheezing on the side on this sofa, and the lads are like, they obviously kind of aren't really taking it seriously because they're like, he's just pissed.
Yeah.
And so he's like, do you want to call an ambulance? And I was like, yes, please. Like, I'm really kind of emotional by this point. And I'm so emotional at this point that I think I'm like done. I'm like in my head, this is it. I'm done. And so I asked Matt Williams to basically give me his phone so I could write down my last will, which is just as like, he's still got it. I have no idea what's on it. I don't know what's on my will, Jacob. But it's on Matt's phone, and he's like, it's that one thing that he's holding over me for the rest of my life. And the sad thing is that the story finishes with the ambulance rocking up. I felt so bad for wasting their time. And they got there, and they walked in, and they just go, "You had a few drinks, have you?" And I'm like, yeah. And they go, because they're obviously worried that I've got alcohol poisoning or something. And they turn to Matt, and they're like, "How much has he had to drink tonight?" And Matt just looks at them, like, he kind of looks to the side, and he's like, "I think he's probably had 4 or 5 pints of beer." And as in, they just look at him, they're like, 4 or 5 pints of beer, and you've called the ambulance here. Like, what are you doing? I felt like a complete sham. So yeah, I was obviously absolutely fine in the end. But
that's good.
Hey Williams has got my last. No, absolute shocker.
Oh, Snake, he's got a mega memory, that guy. Great question.
He does, yeah.
That's a good start.
Such a good question.
Okay, now this question's come in a few times. 3 or 4 people have sent this one in. Sort of, can you sing a song? Because obviously you're known for a pretty gun voice. We've had a few guys on the podcast already. Angus Tarvell sung Creed. Jeremy Thrush, Adele. Be good to get a UK version of one of your favourite songs. I hear you've got a really good voice.
Jimmy, I think it can speak to how bad my voice is. I can't do it for you. I just can't. The boys know that I love White Tiger. So there's a song called White Tiger.
Come on, give us some.
That's what they want, I think. Okay. Right, I'm going to compose my singing voice.
Yeah.
Should I just do it close to the microphone?
Yeah.
Ooh, White Tiger. That's as much as I'll do it. So I'm not doing any more than that.
Mate, that was actually unbelievable. Hey, they weren't wrong.
Don't lie to me, mate.
That was impressive. Do you get a hard time for that voice?
Honestly, I'm not going to go any more than that. Genuinely, every time I'm like a proper. I love I'm that guy in the car. I love singing.
Yeah.
But I've just been berated by my friends over time for having a terrible voice. So I'm just like I won't do it. I'm just scarred by the years of abuse. So
mate, that was quite.
Sorry,
good,
that's as much as I'll go.
I was expecting a lot worse. That was quality.
Oh no, mate.
Okay. What happened when you went to the skate park?
One of my lockdown hobbies was learning to skateboard, and I obviously have got a good history with injury, so I'm kind of one of those clumsy people that gets hurt. And I was skating around, and everyone's kind of taking the piss. They're like, "What are you doing? You're having a midlife crisis here." And it's 2 days before a game, and I'm kind of just skating to get my hair cut or whatever. So down where in Sunbury, there's a skate park on the roundabout where there's the barbers and stuff. So I was skating past, and I'm like, oh, I'm not going to go to a skate park. I'm just going to kind of skate around because I don't want to hurt myself while I'm playing rugby.
Yeah.
And I just I looked there as I skated past it, and I was like, yeah, there's no one there. Normally it's really full. I was like, oh, I'll give it a crack. Never been anywhere near one before, and so I just there's obviously a big slope going this big bowl, and I've just gone to the top of it and jumped on my board. And genuinely had as I'm going down, quick wobble, properly shit myself. I fell off, my board flew into the air, and I've literally gone proper comedic slipped on my arse, and then just hit my arse on the floor, and then twatted my face just on the concrete. And so I'm lying there on the floor 2 days before a game, we've literally just got the team run the next day, and I'm lying on the floor, and I'm I've just knocked myself out, I'm absolutely fucked it. I literally just lay on the floor for probably about 5 minutes, just sitting there like, what have I done? I'm an absolute idiot. And obviously I rocked up the next day to do the team run, and like I'd actually kind of hurt my hip a bit. So I was like running around. Boys are like, what are you doing? Are you okay? And I was like, yep, absolutely fine. Don't worry about it. So like next day, like I'm absolutely fine and like get through the game. But it's just like I said to myself after that, I was like, I'm never going to a skate park ever again.
Mate, that's
nearly
why,
had a shocker.
that's actually why you've retired, isn't it? It's the concussion from the
Yeah,
skate
don't tell the insurance people like that. But yeah. Yeah, oh man, I was properly sketched out. It was just like a worst nightmare.
Oh, classic. Good yarns. Okay. What's your family cat's name and why?
I'm happy this has come out now because the man in question knows. So, this is just a horrible story. I had a family cat when I was younger, right? And I kind of grew up in the area. Everyone, like a few of the lads that we grew up here, were always kind of London Irish fans or whatever. And when I must have been like probably 12, like 12. My sister was 14, and we got a cat for the first time. My family, my mum got a cat, and we were kind of thinking about names. And my sister goes, this is she's like, that team you're playing for, they've got a player called Topsy, as in Topsy Ojo, like the kind of the record holder for. Do you know this, by the way?
The legend. No, I don't know this one.
Yeah, so Topsy. So Daisy was like, yeah, we'll call it Topsy. And so my cat's called Topsy. Like, I go living the next kind of 6 years of my life with my family cat, as you do. I never really thought at that time that I'd end up playing with him. And so he, obviously we get, and like, I can't remember, on like a night out or something, like one of my like friends in the academy found out in my first year that my cat was called Topsy. And obviously like Topsy's at the club, like this club legend is still playing. And so like, I'm just like mortified that someone knows and that someone's going to tell him. So I've genuinely got like, I've basically like made everyone swear they'd never tell him because I was so embarrassed that my cat's called Topsy. And I literally like whole career, like ended up being like good mates with him. Like he's kind of like obviously a club legend, retired a few years ago. Like he never found out. And he actually lives really near me now. So we both live in Sunbury. And so he literally lives over the road. And so like we go to the same corner shop. So we bump into each other every now and again, like talk about stuff, whatever. And my missus, who had never met him, was like, we were going to the shop to get something, and Topsy's there, and like we have a bit of a chat. And I'm like, oh, they hadn't met, so I was like, oh, Melanie, this is Topsy. Yeah. And Melanie just like, without saying hi to him, obviously she said hi, but she looks at me and she goes, that's the one. And I was like, what do you mean? She was like, that's the guy you named your cat after. And like straight to his face. And I'm there just like, I will kill you. I'm just like, I can't believe it got to this point 7 years down the line from when I first met him. And like Melanie is the person to just say, just outright, like, oh, that's the guy you named your cat after. And he obviously is just like, what the fuck? Like, I had no idea. So that was a bit of a shocker. But so that was.
Are you still together?
We're still together, yeah. And Topsy still talks to me as well. So everyone lived happy ever after. But yeah, like it's just one of those things that you're so embarrassed about as a kid. Yeah. And then I was like, as a grown man now, like 7 years after I first met him.
And the longer you left it, the weirder it got.
The weirder it got. And like at this point, like I've stopped playing with him. It'd been 2 years after. Like, he just never found out. And honestly, so embarrassing.
Oh, good stuff. Okay. Can you do a kickflip?
I cannot do a kickflip. I unfortunately cannot do a kickflip. I'm like, I've said about my kind of issue at the skate park. Yeah. Like I've just a bit like I still like, to be fair, I love skating, but like I just like skate around. Yeah. And like I basically have these like kids like that. I know this is him from Jacob as well now. I like had like, so I will like skate around Sunbury or whatever. Just like it's kind of like easy to get around, whatever. But obviously, like there's loads of schools around, and like I've had a kid come up to me, as in like just like they're like loads of kids go home from school, and they're like everyone like shouts like, "Can you do a kickflip?" And I'm like, "No, I can't do a kickflip," and he's just like, "You fucking loser. And then just starts like shouting at me because I can't do a kickflip. I'm sitting there like on my way home from training or whatever, getting abused by this like 10-year-old kid who can't do a kickflip. Like, yeah, pretty horrendous.
Oh, good stuff. You must be able to do an ollie though.
Genuinely, I've just kind of learned. I've done a couple, mate. But this is the thing, like everyone says like, oh yeah, I like skateboarding. And everyone's like, could you do that? And I'm like, no. And they're like, could you do that? I'm like, no.
You're just like
To be
right.
fair, like anybody, I just like cruising around.
Yeah.
Like, but everyone's kind of like, everybody's played with me, it's like seen the size of my feet. I've got like clown, like size like 12 and a half feet. And so like, I've just never meant to like be skillful with them. Like even now, to be fair, like the boys send around, I'm like one of those guys that like falls over his own feet. So like people were sending around videos, like literally in training the other day, like no one around me, just like they'll like jogging backwards, getting in position and just like tripping over and just like properly stacking it. So I still do that. So a kickflip's a way off for me.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, that goes back to this one. Is it true that London Irish had to get an excavator to replace your divots after each kickoff?
Yes, they did. I had.
This one's from.
I had someone.
This one's from Brendan McKenna.
Yeah,
Loves it.
I told someone this the other day. I had so one of these feet, this foot injury that I was telling you about. So obviously I've had like operation on it's my kicking foot, my right foot.
Yeah.
And so it's taken me like operation. It's been about 7 months since I did it, and kind of my feet. And obviously I'd come back and done a bit of kicking, and I kind of was back in training. It's like my first day in training after 7 months out, and I've literally like I've been kind of like thinking about this moment. I'm like, right, I'm gonna have to do a kickoff for the start of training. And to be fair, like even now, I still get a bit sketchy about doing kickoffs because everyone's there watching you. You're like, just kick it to the pod. I just want to catch it. It's not a big deal. And so it's my first day back in training, and I'm kind of standing there like shaking with the ball. And Kivo's like, "Don't kick the floor, Boris." And I'm like, look up, and I'm like, oh God, here we go. And so I've like gone through, like dropped the ball, and as I've gone to kick it, I've hit the ball. I've hit the floor genuinely about that far behind the ball, like absolutely belted the floor, just like topped the ball like 10 yards as it rolls forward and someone picks it up. And everyone's like, people are just screaming at me. And genuinely, like, this is my first kick back in training. And I'm like, I've broken my foot again. I've taken such a big divot out of the pitch that my foot's gone. I'm done. And I'm sitting there just like, what has happened? Yeah, Kivo just got well and truly in my head that day.
I think I remember that. Oh, he was good at that sort of stuff. Oh.
I was just like, if anyone else had said it, I probably would have been like, yeah, funny. But I was just like, oh no, it's going to happen. Yeah, honestly, horrendous.
2 more questions. How'd you get the nickname Boris?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, if you've listened to like an hour of this podcast, you probably know by now. I'm just like, I had this thing when I was coming through the academy of like, I would just tell like, I'm the guy who like tells like really just boring facts. Like I'll just say to me like, oh, I found something out today. And it's just like, no one cares. Like no one cares, which is fair enough. And then, so I had a mate in the academy, Ollie Adams. He was this like kind of like South London, like bit of a geezer. And I like told him something and he was like, mate, you are so boring. Like just stop telling me these nothing stories. And he like, after a while, he said, I felt bad for calling you boring all the time. So I thought I'd just give you a boring name. So I'll call you Boris. And thankfully, it's not related to Boris Johnson. For everyone in the UK, I'm not like Boris Johnson. So it's not to do with that. But he literally, and it was one of those, you know, when you get a nickname, like Snake did.
Yeah.
And you just fight it, and you just fight it, and you fight it, and then everyone loves it. And like, it got to the point where no one knew particularly why I was called Boris, but the fact that I hated it so much, so everyone kind of loved it. Like, I grew to kind of love it. It was kind of a bit of me, and yeah, obviously, like I still get called it and stuff. So I like it now. But yeah, it came out from Ollie, just giving me a bit of stick, basically.
Mate, I had no idea that was the background of that. That's a good yarn. Okay, last question.
Yeah.
One piece of advice you'd give a young rugby player coming through the grades.
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned it earlier, and it's when I kind of look back and I was talking to you about those kind of early years in my career. I think just like learning to be like build like good relationships with people around you. Like you mentioned, like obviously like you and like Kibbo, you mentioned, and I looked at you guys and kind of just the ability to like just like connect with people and have a good laugh. Obviously, while you're playing, I know there's times where you take stuff seriously, but just build like invest in the relationships around you, like take care of your mates, like have a really good time with them and like enjoy kind of coming through, or just enjoy playing rugby with your mates and the group of people that you have, because like you'll know when you look back at your, like I'm kind of having at the moment, like if people ask me about like the best times in my career, the first thing I'm probably going to say is not like it was this win or it was this thing that we won. Like, while that's great, but it's like it's kind of the cool memories and the fun you have, like the times you're like pissing around with your mates, like building like really good relationships, or like it's obviously like I think it's a skill that will make you better at rugby, but also you'll like enjoy your time, you'll enjoy what you're doing, and you'll have brilliant people around you. And I think that's the thing that I would say to young rugby players: don't get too hung up on being just rugby. Just like have good relationships around that, and really enjoy your time.
Oh man, how good's that advice? What a way to finish the podcast. Some of the greatest advice we've had on yet. But anyway, mate, really appreciate you coming on the podcast. Gutted to hear that you've had to retire, but I'm stoked to hear that you're still feeling well. You're not going to be suffering as you go forward, and really looking forward to seeing what is next for you. I'm excited to see what team you end up being their sports psych. Obviously going to be a gun at it. The way you always thought about the game and the way you spoke about just things in general always interest me, and mate, you'll be an absolute guru, and looking forward to following your journey in that space. But really appreciate you coming on the podcast and giving up your time.
Mate, really appreciate it, Jimmy. It was good fun. It was good to catch up again, mate.
Yeah, likewise. You're a lad.
What a lad, what a lad, what a lad, what a lad.